Hello and welcome to yet another commentary from King's Comments about the Russian-Ukraine war. And today is August the 1st, Thursday, and there's a lot to go through here with respect to Frontline changes. I don't usually get into the specifics of the towns or the villages or the cities that are being captured or the amount of land that's actually moving towards Russian control. But what we've seen here over the last bit has been Russian advancement along the front in a more interesting way than before. I typically use the word measured to describe the Russian advance on the Donetsk, Luhansk area of the battlefront, and I consider the Kharkiv region more of a diversion because of the fact that the amount of forces that were sent there were essentially there to create a buffer zone and to tie up Ukrainian forces that otherwise would have been deployed in the east. And what we're seeing is the results of that kind of delaying action all along the Luhansk area, specifically in the Kupiansk region. We're seeing major Russian advancement. We're also seeing in the Donetsk area along the Avdiivka, Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, Turetsk, New York front. We're seeing major Russian thrusts through these areas. And these thrusts are more than just brigade size. They've been accompanied by Russian armored columns and tanks, and the FPV drone operators on the Ukrainian side have simply been unable to deal with the tactics that have been deployed by the Russian armed forces with respect to these breakthroughs. The worst of worst things that could have happened to the Ukrainians right now is happening essentially in three major areas. One is an area called Konstantinivka. The other area is called Krasnogorovka. And the third area is called Turetsk. And I would also add with that the New York salient and Chasiv Yar itself. All of these areas are being squeezed. And what we're seeing is we're seeing Russian pincers either create cauldrons of encirclement or completely obliterate the enemy to the point where we're seeing mass engagements of Ukrainian soldiers fleeing the scene. And I do want to discuss what's going on in the Kharkiv Oblast, but what we're seeing there primarily is attrition on a level that really hurts the Ukrainian armed forces, because their mobilization efforts of about 25 to 30,000 men a month are being eaten up by their losses each month, which are at this particular point at least 1,500 to 2,000 men a day. So whatever new soldiers are being mobilized to the front, they're not being able to meet with the demands of the attrition rate right now. And keep in mind that the new soldiers are not the ones from the past. These are not patriots. These are new conscripts with very little training, and they really don't have that bite or patriotism or zest for combat. And to be quite frank, neither do they have the skill for it, because of the fact that they're fighting seasoned, battle-hardened Russian soldiers who are being rotated out of the lines and constantly being upgraded at the expense of Ukrainians that have been there for sometimes 16, 18 months without any rotation and just feeling the effects of this war if they haven't already been killed or injured. So the situation on the battlefront right now in the Kupiansk, in the Donetsk region, is horrific for the Ukrainian soldiers, for Ukrainian defenses. General Syrskyi, the commander-in-chief of the ground forces in Ukraine, has as much admitted so. There's absolutely no ability for the Ukrainians to launch a counteroffensive with the lack of manpower that they have. And the one thing that I've noticed here, and we're getting this from all of the Telegram channels, we're getting this from all of the mapping channels, is that the Russians are hunting Ukrainian artillery systems, Patriot systems, to great effect. And as I indicated in my previous audio message, Patriot systems, HIMARS systems, any kind of missile defense systems are being eliminated in short order. So as quickly as they hit the battlefield is as quickly as they're being eliminated. And I think what we're seeing is that as this war goes on and continues, it just is creating a juggernaut in the Russian war machine. This is not to say that Russia is without its challenges, without its own difficulties, logistically, manpower, but to be quite honest, they have the ability to replace losses. They have the ability to engage the enemy much better. Their lines of supply are not harassed, and they have the ability to arm themselves in a way that their military-industrial complex can do at the expense of the Western military-industrial complex. And what are we seeing as it directly relates to the issues of the Western military-industrial complex? What we're seeing is that money doesn't buy you what you think it does, particularly as it relates to the United States. The U.S. has spent billions of dollars on munition systems, and for the most part, those munition systems have failed to make a difference on the battlefield. And I dare say that they've failed entirely in any way to create a situation where the strategic advantage would be with Ukraine. And to give an example of what I'm saying, a lot of the munitions in the United States are simply being jammed, and the ATACMS being one of them. You've got Patriot systems that are being eliminated, HIMARS systems, you have tanks, the M1 Abrams tanks, armored personnel carriers like the Bradleys. They're being eliminated, and it's creating a real problem for the Ukrainians to deal with, because an army without armor is basically an army that is completely defenseless. I think this is extremely hard to deal with for the Ukrainians. They're beginning to realize, even the best of them, that this war is lost. Any hope of regaining the advantage is lost. It's just simply not possible at this particular point. I would liken the situation today on the battlefield with 1944 Germany during World War II, when the Russian offensive was in full swing. There was absolutely nothing that the Germans could do tactically or strategically to change that outcome. It was just a matter of time before the Red Army was going to enter Berlin and capture the city and eliminate them as a threat. And what we're seeing right now is pretty much a replay of that on the battlefield. We're seeing the Russian military exert its force, its abilities in ways that they weren't able to do in 2022. And to give an example of this, we're seeing more of a coordinated effort on the part of the Russian aerospace forces to work with the rest of the military to engage targets that weren't being engaged before. And I'm not talking about the military-industrial complex as much as I'm talking about ammunition, supply depots, and recruitment points where large numbers of either military instructors or Ukrainian troops are being assembled. And this is really, really hurting the Ukrainian army, because a lot of the soldiers that are meant to be going to the front, and I'm talking about the conscripts, are getting killed long before they even hit the front because of Russian FAB bombs and ODAB bombs that are being used to eliminate the actual deployment areas where these individuals are being assembled. And it's a real issue because clearly, I believe the issue on the ground is that there are people on the ground that are working with the Russians to ensure that they harass the Ukrainians consistently. And that begins a real problem because in terms of assets, in terms of their ability to be able to provide information, to act as quote-unquote spies, gives them the ability to be able to handle what's happening in a way that the Ukrainians simply can't get a hold of. And this is true for the West. We heard about just recently Western instructors being targeted and eliminated. And this is only going to continue. And as Western instructors decide to put themselves closer to the battle, they're going to be huge targets. One of the things that just came up was the delivery of these F-16s. These F-16s are not a lot of them. I must let everyone know that the F-16 is an older model plane. It's no match for the Russian aircraft, the SUs right now. And these planes will have no impact on the battlefield at all. They're going to be hunted as soon as they get there. And again, I keep using the word wonder weapons. These wonder weapons will have absolutely no advantage whatsoever. I don't consider this a wonder weapon simply because it's old, it's lost its tactical advantage or tactical value. And the only value that it may have is that it will provide an opportunity for Ukraine to bomb the Russians when they want to or when they need to. But to be quite honest, by the time they hit the skies, they'll be eliminated. Either the defense systems will eliminate them or Russian aircraft will eliminate them because they're being hunted as we speak. So this is a lost cause moving forward. From a war perspective, I think what we're seeing right now is the Ukrainian army being decimated to the point where they can't do anything. And there's even talk right now of mobilizing the Ukrainian youth from 18 years and 24 years, I believe. Again, another meat grinder. I don't know how long the Ukrainian people will continue to support this insanity, but they're participants in their own demise if they continue to support it, because the Russians will just simply eliminate generations upon generations of youth. They've already destroyed their country. They've destroyed their ability to be able to exist the way that they could have when the opportunity for peace was available at Istanbul during those talks where they walked away. So any talk of peace is going to be on Russian terms. It will not be on anybody else's terms but the Russians. And if anyone thinks that they're going to join NATO, or if they're going to present a security threat to the Russians moving forward, I got news for you. The blood of Russians that have died over there will mean something to the Russian state. They will have their next great patriotic parades on May Day, recalling these events in Ukraine as they did in World War II. And I just don't see an opportunity for victory. The West right now is fragmented. We're seeing that fragmentation all over the place. NATO is fighting with itself. We have different factions of democracies that are fully behind Ukraine, and then we have others that aren't. And this is making for a real issue, particularly in the countries where they were gung-ho with helping Ukraine. Countries like the United States under the Biden administration, where there's some doubt as to whether or not the gravy train will continue with whoever wins that election. We also see this issue prevalent in Great Britain, where the new Prime Minister has set limits on the ability of Ukraine to use their Storm Shadow missiles. We're seeing all sorts of things taking place that spell bad news for the Ukrainian state in general. And I think once the Ukrainian military is completely routed, which we are getting very close to, then the next step is to destabilize the current state of Ukraine. And they have a chance to sue for peace now. They have a chance to deal with the terms that Putin gave them. And I think it's pretty clear that the reason why Putin started with those terms was because of the fact that he knows, and I think the world knows, that their days are numbered if they don't accept those terms. So there's no going back now. If they decide not to accept those peace terms, then people like Zelensky, Kuleba, Zaluzhny, and all these people may find themselves sitting in Russian jails if they're lucky, or they'll have to leave the country because of the fact that there will be some form of destabilization, in my opinion, coming for them. Now, the thing that I do want to add with this is that in order for Ukraine to fully mobilize, they would literally have to mobilize Western Ukrainians, specifically those that have been chilling in the pubs, having a good time in the clubs. They would literally have to mobilize those people, mobilize people that are sons of the people that are sitting in the Rada, which is the Ukrainian parliament. They would literally have to make it hard for the elites in Ukraine to continue to operate the way that they've done. And that day is coming. Trust me, it's coming, because they're running out of available men. Now, the battlefield itself is proving to be much worse than it was even during my last audio message. And part of that reason is because of the fact that the Russians have decided that they're not going to fight this war of stalemate. They've made a decision to increase the amount of soldiers at the front, change their tactics, and introduce new munition systems that are designed to inflict maximum damage on the enemy. And this is working because of the fact that we've seen major issues with heavily fortified areas in the Touretsk area, heavily fortified areas in New York. Excuse me, in the New York area. And we're seeing Russian forces, once thought never to happen, in an area called Konstantinivka, which is a major Ukrainian supply hub point. And we're starting to see that city or village may fall as quickly as Chasiv Yar is being used as a vice grip at present, with the Russians controlling all of the east and then tightening the vice along the western part as we speak. So this is part of a general Russian plan, and it's clearly working, and that plan is to envelop large amounts of Ukrainians that are wanting to fight, kill them all, and those that are running from the battlefield, those that are going to end up either prisoners or dead at another point where they're likely to be encircled again. So I do want to add that, in my opinion, I don't see this lasting another year, simply because I just don't see it happening. I do see some developments taking place internally within Ukraine. And Ukraine is starting to put out peace feelers, because they themselves know that they cannot sustain these casualties and sustain these losses, knowing fully well that they're replacing many of the hardened troops with people that, quite frankly, just learned how to fire a gun. So I want to thank everyone for their support, their likes, and for subscribing to my fledgling channel. We will be putting out new information here shortly as it happens. And one of the things that we will be discussing along the way is some of the geopolitical narratives that are taking place worldwide, not just because of the Ukraine war or because of the fallout of the war, but in other areas such as the Middle East conflict, the conflict in Asia. All of these things are going to be discussed to some extent. Thank you very much.